This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
We both rocking the black V-necks today. Did you notice this?
I did notice that. That's it's I guess it's not that uncommon that we're matching. At least we're not wearing the exact same shirt as we often are in the Engine Vision Media stuff.
What are you wearing?
This is a company that I like called Fresh Clean Threads. They just do kind of neutral color V-necks that fit me correctly. So it's kind of a monthly subscription. They send you 5 until you turn it off every month. So I've got a stash of these now.
Okay. Speaking of merch, we have a winner. By the way, some of those people who were a little kind of pushed out of shape on YouTube because we took a little longer than usual to get in. I did want to commend you, though. I've noticed on Twitter or X, however you want to refer to it these days, that you have magnanimously started guaranteeing this show money back. I mean, Mark, your generosity is not spoken of enough. I mean, this is just absolutely, you're just a mensch beyond all mensches. I want to take the time to respond to those 3 or 4 individuals who found it. I always I'll never listen again because you and Gary had too much fraternal banter or something. Sometimes I don't see Gary, even though we're oftentimes in the same building for a week, and I enjoy seeing Gary and talking to Gary. And sometimes that requires banter that doesn't involve legal work.
Well, yeah, and what I would also say is turn around to your peer group, because it's not our fault that there are a multitude of great comments that we want to highlight. And I will say this week's a little different because this may be the first week that you did not send me any comments and I sent you one, and we both agreed that would be the winner for this week. It was from Tuck J36, and it says GPS is worried that the next time he's in downtown LA, 3 shell casings will be found that say mid-week and update. I thought that was really funny. I mean,
it's not only funny, and by the way, it's
funny, it's timely,
and
I'm
not reading our comments this week because this. In fact, I just finished an article I think it was in the New Yorker, and the article was. It's funny. It took a day or 2 to get to it, but the article was. Let's see. A man was murdered in cold blood, and you're laughing, out of the New Yorker magazine. Have you seen this?
I have not seen that particular article, but I've certainly seen quite a bit of banter online about all the uproar about how people have been responding to this story on Twitter. So
I just sent it to Gary, and for those who are living under a rock, the CEO of United Healthcare was assassinated on the streets of New York. Here's the article right here. A man was murdered in cold blood, and you're laughing. When she's talking about laughing, the memes surrounding this are like nothing I've ever seen. It is next level savagery where, I mean, some of them are just hard to even repeat because obviously the man's got a wife, coincidentally named Paulette, and he's got kids, and you don't wish ill to anybody, especially in a situation like this. But there are the collection of comments, and that's what this New Yorker article references, are unbelievable. And I have a lot of friends who are MDs, doctors, and who blame Obamacare for this. That's Obamacare is the boogeyman. And I said, you guys just don't understand because the friends I'm talking to are all males or identify as males, and good save. And they blame Obamacare, and I said, and I had to Google, and I found it. Did you have the article? There's back in 2007 to show that things. The more it changed, the more they stay the same. This is a case. What is the date of that?
It is Friday, the 21st of December, 2017. So almost
2007.
2007, my mistake, 2007. So almost 17 years coming up this month.
Yeah, this was a client of mine, and Gary and I are looking at an article in The Guardian, and it was a 17-year-old from Glendale, a wonderful Armenian woman who had complications from a bone marrow transplant.
Natalie Sarkeesian, I believe it says.
Yeah, Natalie Sarkeesian, her mom, Hilda, is just delightful and known for many years. And we had this case, and I vividly remember it affected me greatly at the time, prior to Obama even being president. And I had actually called on the LADA to press murder or manslaughter charges against Cigna Healthcare. And I said that they had maliciously killed Natalie because they had denied her a liver transplant after the complications from the bone marrow transplant. And then the California Nurses Association got involved. California Nurses Association did a protest right up here in Glendale. And it was...
And reading a little bit more into this case, I believe that the grounds that they denied the liver transplant on was because they deemed it an experimental treatment or something ludicrous like that, right? Some kind of just, basically they said, the magic words aren't here, and therefore we're not going to provide this thing that every doctor who's been involved says is a medical necessity in order to save this person's life. Is that...
Right. And she was at UCLA. The UCLA doctors all said this is absurd. And it reminded me of, circling back midweek on the bullets downtown. No, the on the bullets of the CEO or the casings of the CEO who was murdered in New York was delay, defend, or delay, deny, something along those lines.
I think it was delay, deny, depose.
Right. This was 17 years ago. And what they did until we did the protest in Glendale, the proverbial California Nurses Association, the Armenian community came out. Then they relented because they were so upset about what happened. And by then they had denied and delayed long enough that she died. And we ended up suing Sigma. I will tell you something. You would not have, if it turns out, big if, everybody assumes now that, I heard insider trading. I heard a lot of motives. Alan Dershowitz had said, you got to look at the insider trading. Maybe he was cooperating. I don't know if that was the case. Then they were very sharp, and it was very fortuitous that they put delay and deny if that's true, what's being reported on the casings. If that's not true, and that's some kind of a AI formulated BS, then I stand corrected. But if it is true, then, and the way that this thing took place, if the DA in LA County 17 years ago had done something, had charged the corporation, charged the people who actually made the decisions with something because of what they did, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation. Maybe you wouldn't have it. And by the way, when they're writing an article in the New Yorker that they've never seen this thing, I don't think it's part of the kind of tenor of that article or the theme is, well, this has more to do with the polarization and the lack of norms that we have. No, I take great issue with that.
That is patently false, because I've seen people from all walks of life who are getting in on this. It is not dividing along political lines. So much is today that it's very easy to see that is not the case. This is the internet, at large, just revolting against this, and people's long held frustrations with the medical industry just spilling over. And it's horrible for the family that survives, that they are, the ones this is directed at, and that the jokes are at their peril. But ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily even about this one person. It's ultimately about the whole system and the wild mismanagement and unfairness that often is rife within it.
I will tell you, if they arrest this person, apparently they've got his name, if it is a he, and if it is somebody who was denied a loved one's treatment, which, by the way, one of the doctors, I won't mention him because I don't know if I didn't get permission, that I've been talking about this with, had predicted that minute one when he heard this, minute one, before the bullet casing, supposed evidence, before anything else. He says, I will guarantee you, I have seen in my practice the denial of life-saving care by insurance companies and what that does to the survivors. and the kind of how it trips something. And I was telling him I saw it 17 years ago. I was thinking to myself, back in '07, I had a daughter who was not that much different in age, and it was horrific to have to think about, and what Hilda had to go through and her husband. This idea that just because some bean counter up in Glendale decides that a liver transplant is too experimental, until there is so much public pressure that they reverse themselves, but by then it's too late. That is the definition of what they do.
Yeah. And it's absolutely, I think you were sort of starting to head there, but if they do catch this person and he does end up going to trial, I think you're going to have a difficult time finding 12 people who can be dispassionate about this, because if it has touched your life, even, in the extended family, you can get a lot of disillusioned people.
Well, and that's a nice segue into the next case we want to talk about. It's amazing to me, because when they catch this guy, obviously he will be charged and prosecuted, probably by the Manhattan DA's office, who has, and look, Karen Agnifilo used to work for us and is a friend of the show and was the assistant deputy, or assistant head deputy, assistant to Cy Vance, who is not the DA now bringing this case. But this case being prosecuted against Daniel Penny is such an outrage, is so over the top, is so ridiculous. And what has happened in the last 24 hours on this case makes me just want, if I was on a little higher up than the fourth floor, to just jump out. I don't know if you've seen it, but Gary, you might as well kind of regale us with what happened yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen it. I've been watching it very carefully for, I'll go back just a little bit further. The jury deliberation started on December 3rd. So before that, let's get into a little bit of what was said in the closing by each side. The defense basically came with, who would you want on the train? What kind of a person would you want on the train with you if you were riding the subway and somebody erratic who was possibly under the influence of drugs and threatening violence? Like, what kind of person would you want on the train with you? And their point being that, their client was providing a service to those who may not have been able to defend themselves on that train car. I think a reasonable argument to make given their position.
By the way, that's why we have a jury. That's why there is a jury system. The jury is supposed to be the conscience of the community. That's the whole idea.
Exactly.
So that is a perfectly appropriate argument, as opposed to.
You want to play a little bit of the interview that the cops did with Daniel Penny before we get into what the prosecution was arguing?
Yes. Please.
Okay, we'll play just a little bit here, and then when we get to the magic point, I'll go ahead and stop it, and we'll continue. So this is some of the interview that the police did with Daniel Penny. I believe this was before he knew that Jordan Neely had become deceased, and he was not under arrest. So this was just their interview with Daniel.
Kind of run with me and Detective Medina, the course of your day, where you're coming from, where you're going, and then what led up to the incident on the train.
Absolutely. So I have class down in Brooklyn. I take the F down to J Street Metro Tech. My class is at 12. So once the class finished up, I was going straight to the gym. I go to the gym in Lifetime on 23rd Street. So I get off. I take the F straight from school to the gym. Was on there. I forget what stop it was at, but some guy came in. He's like, whipped his jacket off, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill everybody. I can go to prison forever. I don't care. I don't do this." At that point, I looked to the person next to me like, "Hey, just hang on to this phone for me." I had my headphones in and took it off and just kind of like grabbed him from behind because he came in just to because he was acting like a lunatic, like a crazy person. So, and he was rolling around the floor, and at that point the train stopped. I was like, "Someone call the cops." And he's still like rolling around, still going crazy. I had two other guys kind of help me, just kind of keep him from going nuts. And yeah. That's when you guys came. He got on like diagonally from me. So he came in, but I was on my phone, like listening to music. I wasn't paying attention. He's just a crackhead, you know what I mean?
So the prosecution
at the end there, so that what Gary's going to highlight is he's saying the guy's taking off his jacket. He's saying, I'll go to prison for the rest of my life. I'm going to, take everybody out on this train. About as good a statement reflecting the mental state of the of this person that you can get.
Right. And what the prosecution in their closing on December 2nd, before this case went to the jury, what they focused on in their closing was that last comment that he made there when he was talking about who he regarded as getting on the train across from him and the fact that he called him a crackhead. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't know that that is a derogatory term given the state that the decedent was in. I walk through downtown Los Angeles 5 days a week, and that at some point it becomes a factual statement about the person. If someone is a habitual drug user and is openly using drugs in the streets of downtown LA, that's how I would describe them as well, because at a certain point that becomes a statement of fact and is no longer derogatory. I don't.
By the way, the guy should be a forensic toxicologist or have the sixth sense, because in fact they did a tox screen.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what the prosecution decided to lean on. The fact that he was calling him names and using derogatory language, or what they view as derogatory language. So the case was given to the jury on the 3rd. They deliberated on the 3rd. They deliberated on the 4th. On the 5th, so now day 3 of deliberations, the jurors asked to review the testimony from the medical examiner, the definitions of recklessness and negligence, and videos, including both the police body camera footage and the bystander recordings. Okay, so that was a development that I think you and I were both a little bit surprised by, but nonetheless, that's what they asked for. Then I
think that when we were texting back and forth, I said obviously this has the makings of a hung.
Yes, we did, but I was at least surprised that they were at a point where they needed to review all of that on day 3.
I wasn't on this show, but I did some TV commentary, and I said the problem with a case like this is, and I've seen it a zillion times. You saw it in the last case we tried. There's always somebody who's, no matter how many times the judge tells you, you can't, and no matter how many times I do a voir dire on it, there's always somebody who goes back into that deliberation room and just advocates for the prosecution immediately out of the box without deliberating. Always.
100%.
100%. Yeah. And that's what was happening here. In spite of this guy should have gotten a medal as opposed to a prosecuted. So go on. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So they review all of that on the 5th. They continue deliberating. On the 6th, they come in, continue deliberating, and then they send the judge a note. And they say, we cannot come to a unanimous verdict on the first count, which is manslaughter. The judge.
And mind you, so they understand there's 2 counts. First count, you have to get through it. If it's guilt, you're done. If it's not guilty, then you have to decide whether the not guilty was based on justification before you make the decision to go to the second count, the negligent homicide.
Correct. So the judge basically gives them an Allen charge, which you can describe that if you right. Probably know.
Outlawed
better.
In California state court. The Allen charge is what we call the dynamite charge. That was outlawed in California, just basically to try and throw a stick of dynamite into the jury room.
Yeah, it's basically a way to compel them to go back and reach a verdict, right? And
and that still didn't work.
That still didn't work. The judge even discussed giving them a second Allen charge. I don't believe he did, but it was discussed amongst counsel. And eventually the state decided, well, maybe we'll just go ahead and withdraw the first count, which the judge.
In the height of chutzpah, this is the same, mind you, and I did the disclosure with Karen, who is not there and was not there during any of this. But what is going on in that DA's office? How in the world do you take a guy to trial, go all the way, you've got a hung jury, you get an Allen charge, and then you say, okay, guess what? We'll show you how we're really going to fuck you. We are going to fuck you so bad. We're going to basically concede we overcharged the shit out of this. We're going to dismiss that so that we can get basically the negligent homicide.
The judge says in open court, I'm not sure that follows New York state law. But
by the way, I'm not sure it follows any constitutional provision of law. Exactly. How in the world do you say I went to trial on this count, the main count? the jury is there. The jury's deliberated for 4 days. It's obviously some kind of at least the term in the law is a close call. And we're going to get to that point, and they have to make certain findings to ever get to count 2. And we're just going to pull the rug out from under them and say, oh, we were just joking the whole time. This whole trial was a joke.
And that's exactly what happened, because after the judge said in open court that he didn't think that followed state law, he said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give this one to the prosecution. We'll go ahead and allow them to withdraw the first count. Court's dismissed. Jury can go home. We'll see you on Monday to consider count 2. It's just like, I mean, aside from being illegal,
I guarantee you the defense is going to come in and either tomorrow or Monday morning. My guess is we're recording this Saturday night. So either Sunday they're going to file, or Monday morning they're going to file something and go crazy that he was already once in jeopardy and they can't go forward. I mean, the fact that they dismissed the count that you had to go through in order to get to the second count and say, sorry, we're now just going to go straight to the second count after they deliberated and couldn't come to a resolution on the first count, which is an absolute once you're in jeopardy on that. The dismissal of the first count, I believe, is once in jeopardy, and they cannot proceed on the second count at this point. The case should be over.
I agree with you. And I think that ultimately we'll see what the road that we travel to get there is. But I think one way or another, that's going to be the outcome, because this is just, the judge points out himself that it does not come under the constraints of New York law, and then he lets them do it anyways. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And that's where we stand at this point, is that in theory, they think they're all coming back to consider count 2 on Monday. And we will certainly be watching very closely. Don't you dare say a word that starts with M, W, or U right now, Mark, because we will be watching closely, and we will be looking to update you next Saturday or Sunday, probably Sunday. That's when we tend to release these things. But
the 3 Ds. This may become our new thing: deny, delay, defend.
Well, that's certainly what we do when it comes to the 3 other words we will not speak. We deny, we delay, and then we defend ourselves.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Mark. We'll be watching, and we will have an update for you next week. Thank you all so much for listening. And don't forget to watch and subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast. Mark, thank you so much for your time here on a Saturday or Sunday as you listen.
You got it. Thanks, Gary. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.